Thank you so much for coming. My name is Maureen Aylward. I'm the Executive Director of TownGreen, and we've been working with the City of Gloucester on this fantastic program that we have for you tonight on geothermal energy. I know that the rain has been with us, and so I really appreciate you making it all the way here. And Angie, thank you. Thanks for coming. So we're going to hear from a series of presenters this evening, and I will introduce them in a moment. But I just wanted to go over what we're going to do tonight. So you're going to hear from several folks. And then afterwards for our Q&A session, we're going to have the speakers sit at the different tables. And so we're going to do like a lightning round. You'll spend 8 minutes with one of the speakers, and you can get up and move to another table and talk to another speaker. So you get a chance to talk to them directly rather than having a panel, and we think that that's going to be a really nice thing for you to get some more information. You've been given a survey, and please complete the survey before we start because we're going to track to see how you've learned this evening. And then when the presentations are over after the Q&A, we'd like to finish the survey and we can collect them back at the front when you leave. So now to our speakers. I'm going to introduce all of them at once, not in between. But Shemkus is our first speaker. Sarah is a member of the Gloucester Clean Energy Commission. She is an energy journalist for the Energy News Network. And Sarah also covers business, technology, sustainability, and the places where they all meet. Her work has appeared in The Guardian, the Boston Globe, The Atlantic.com, Slate, and other publications. Sam Cleaves is here with us tonight, and he's a member of Gloucester's Clean Energy Commission. A Gloucester resident, Sam retired from the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, or MAPC, where he worked with municipalities on the North Shore and on Cape Ann, and Sam is also on the TownGreen Advisory Council. Angie Alberto-Escobar is the HEET Director of Gas-to-Geo Transition. Angie manages stakeholders' involvement in building decarbonization, including but not limited to legislators, network geothermal experts, utility executives, and grassroots environmentalists. She shares information and resources across this network, and the goal of her work with HEET is to deploy non-emitting network geothermal infrastructure to retire leaky, aging natural gas pipelines across the country, and in turn, create a safer, cleaner environment for us all. Zach Patnaude, did I say that correct? Okay, is the general manager of water distribution systems, the Northeast leader in geothermal HVAC industry, geothermal heat pumps, and related trim items in the Northeast for U.S. residential and commercial applications. Zach is a certified geothermal engineer from the Association of Energy Engineers. And finally, Lori Timmermann is here with us as a community representative from National Grid. She can tell you more about her role, but it's community solutions, municipal energy efficiency, and climate action planning for the area. She has helped numerous communities understand and implement decarbonization of renewable energy projects. Please welcome all of our speakers this evening, and we're going to get started with Zach, and then Angie, we're going to go to you. There's a little bit of a shift. So welcome, Zach.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. Thank you, Maureen, for inviting me to this event. Let me just set my timer, or I'll just keep talking here for too long. Again, I'm from Water Energy Distributors. We're out of New Hampshire, but we distribute geothermal heat pumps across New England, as well to nearby New York, and we also design geothermal systems commercially. Currently, the closest system is the Squamscott Elementary School. We're actually a part of that, where we design the exterior well field for Hadley Elementary.
Excuse me, could you raise the mic a little bit?
Yeah. Is this better?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. As a company, we have 3 certified geothermal designers on staff. Our founder, Carl Orio, literally wrote the geothermal heat pump manual for the City of New York in the 1990s, and we've wrote many articles through different organizations studying geothermal. But as well as the handbook with McGrail-Hill. So what is the key here is staying warm when it's cold outside. And geothermal, with using 50-degree ground temperatures, we can heat our homes in New England in the 5th tier of the United States. Geothermal is a solar energy, and that's really what it is. Even though geothermal, we're thinking it's the Earth's energy, it's the sun that heats the crust of the Earth, and we're just tapping into that. So geothermal is just another form of solar energy where we're tapping into that ground. It's geothermal, it's renewable, it's alternative, it's energy efficient, it's zero ozone depleting, economically beneficial, and always environmentally responsible. And when tied with solar panels, it's the easiest way to get a net zero building or home. Okay. And again, geothermals, we're tapping into the sun's energy, which heats up the Earth's each crust. Your average ground temperature is commonly your average air temperature where you live. So in Massachusetts, our ground temperatures here are around 50 degrees. If we were to drive down to New York City, we would find about 55-degree ground temperatures. And if we were to drive up to Montreal, we see about 45 degrees. I've done some work in actually India, and when we drilled wells in Hyderabad, we found ground temperatures of 82 degrees, which is a lot warmer than we were hoping for, unfortunately. Every 55 days, the amount of energy the sun emits on the Earth that is absorbed by the Earth's waters and grounds is equivalent to all of the oil and gas fields on the Earth. So if we can just find a way to tap into that energy, we can heat and cool our houses permanently. And again, 50 degrees. What is geothermal? It's the lowest form of heating and cooling you can find in your home. It's the best for the environment, and it is the best for the electrical utility, is because in the coldest months of the year, it's running its most efficient compared to other electric sources. And in the air conditioning seasons, when our electric usage is highest, geothermal is the most efficient use of air conditioning. So we're putting the least tax on our grid as well in the air conditioning season. Commonly, as many of you know, the average residential home, over 70% of the energy used in the home goes between the heating and air conditioning and the hot water use. By going to geothermal, we can commonly extract near 50% of that energy from the ground, and by using 18% of energy which we're using from electricity to run our geothermal heat pump, we can run our home and our air conditioning for the house. So how does geothermal work? I like to break up the system into 3 portions. There's the earth coupling, which is the fancy word for what's outside. There's the heat pump, and then the distribution system in your home. Let's first look at the heat pump. I have a big stand here, but that would be an example of what would replace your furnace. Doesn't look a whole lot different than your furnace now, maybe a little bit taller, commonly 5 feet tall with a footprint of 3 foot by 3 foot. So how do heat pumps work? Everybody in this room today has a heat pump in their house. Your refrigerator. Refrigerator takes heat out of the inside of your fridge and delivers it to your kitchen. If you've ever put your hand on the back of the fridge or the bottom of the fridge, you notice the air is warm, about 90 degrees. A geothermal heat pump or any heat pump works on that same technology. We're moving heat. So instead of taking energy out of your 30-degree fridge or your 0-degree freezer, we're taking energy out of 50-degree water. And we were able to produce 110-degree air or 115 to 120-degree water to then heat our homes. So I love to look at this visual. The original refrigerators, you truly got to see the condenser where you were rejecting the heat in the fridge. Nowadays they like to hide it because they don't want you to see it anymore. And if we don't clean our filters when our fridge locks up because it doesn't get good airflow across the coil in the back. So geothermal works. We've known what's known as water-to-air or water-to-water systems. Mini splits, what many of you might be more common with, are known as air-to-air. So, and what that is where we're taking the energy from the outside and how we're delivering it to the building. So if we were to replace a furnace that has hot or chilled air in the house, for geothermal, that would be a water-to-air application. Or if we had a boiler and replacing a boiler, that would be a water-to-water application. So how does that work? We have a well outside the system, and I'm going to be talking about the different wells, but we are circulating water through our heat pump, and I'll have some examples of what heat exchangers look like in the show and tell later. But we're just circulating water through the geothermal well system and extracting heat from it, commonly 5 degrees of heat. And then that 5 degrees of heat we're able to compress in the refrigeration cycle and heat our homes with. On a boiler application, so again, a furnace application, this is what it would look like. Replacing a boiler, we would have a heat pump that looks much like your boiler now, and that would just heat a hot tank of water, or in the air conditioning months, a cold tank of water. And then we would recirculate water through our house from that. Now, earth coupling. There are 2 main types of earth couplings, or 3 main types, but in New England, we really only see 2 of them. So we have standing column wells, you have open to injection wells, and you have closed loop wells. The last numbers I saw, about 80% of the residential systems installed in Massachusetts were closed loop wells. So here, in a very plain way of looking at it, here are the 3 well types. Starting at all the way to the left, we have a closed loop. I like to think of this like a radiator buried in the ground. They've drilled a hole, and then we're just buried a pipe, and we're recirculating water through that pipe, and no earth water is going in and out of the building. All the way to the right is we have what's known as an open loop, I guess the word got cut out, open to injection loop. Or open to recycle, my words got moved around a little bit. Open to recycle is this all the way to the right. These are the least common systems. Where you see these are on Cape Cod or on Long Island. This is a well where we hit a significant amount of water, and we're never returning that water back to the same well. So that's a well that's producing 100 gallons a minute. That's extremely rare in your average areas. Now on Cape Cod and Long Island, that's extremely common because they have a lot of water. In the middle here, we have what's known as a standing column well, which is where we drill a well like your domestic water well or your drinking water well, and then we run a return pipe back to it, and then we recirculate the water that way. I'll have a couple more examples and pictures later. If you're curious, the heat transfer, you have an advective heat flow in the open loop because the fresh water is always bringing it in. A closed loop, you only have a conductive heat because the heat has to work its way through a plastic pipe, which I'll have some examples of later. And a standing column well is both. So closed loop, and again, this is the most common in Massachusetts. You have both horizontal and vertical closed loop wells. In 16 and a half years doing geothermal, I have seen 5 horizontal closed loop wells because we just have too much rock in New England to drill horizontal well fields. In Oklahoma and Nebraska, they do plenty of horizontal systems. In New England, you only see vertical well systems. The Squamscott Elementary School is installing a vertical closed-loop well system, so they're actually drilling 85 500-foot boreholes for that elementary school that it's getting arranged in a grid formation, which goes to a geothermal vault, and then we pipe that water into the system. Total flow of that building is around 300 gallons a minute flow. Other horizontal systems, which I do like to share, are slinky systems, which literally looks like the old slinky toy we played with as kids. They just stretched it out in the hole. Or most vertical systems, I'll show you, and I also have an example of a concentric later. Here's what your average residential system would look like. Your average residential system has 2 to 3 boreholes. Again, the example on the right, not the example on the left. The only times I've seen a horizontal well be put is when the homeowner was his own civil contractor, so digging a trench wasn't that big of a deal for him. Again, what that closed loop well looks like is they're commonly drilling 300 to 500 feet deep, commonly 4 to 5 inches wide, and then we're burying an 1.25 inch pipe all the way down and back up the well, and we're circulating a water and glycol mixture through that. We're using propylene glycol, which is environmentally friendly, so God forbid we ever have a leak, it's not detrimental to the environment. Unfortunately, some states still allow ethanol and methanol. Luckily, Massachusetts is not one of them. This is an example of what that slinky loops looks like. The pipe salesman loves slinky loop systems because you are putting in miles of pipe. You also have pond loop systems. You'd be surprised how many of these are around. If you live, we're in not near Shrewsbury, but in Shrewsbury there's quite a large condo building that actually runs solely off of a pond loop, closed loop system. What happens when the loop gets charged, it actually sinks to the bottom of the pond. So what you need is a minimum depth and a minimum area of the pond. So these aren't common, but they are more common than you might believe. So standing column wells are the second most common system we have in New England. Commercially, these are much more common. Residentially, it depends. If you have to drill a drinking water well, standing column wells become more common because we can use the same well for both a drinking water well and our geothermal well. So what this basically works off of is just like our drinking water well, we have a pump in the bottom of the well where we're pumping into the home, but instead of using that water like we do in our sinks and our showers, we're just sending that water back to the well, and that's our recirculation loop. The benefit of standing column wells is we're getting direct heat transfer with the earth. We don't have to transfer heat through a plastic pipe. So that allows us to do less drilling on open loop systems, but we have to take into account what the geology is, and water quality becomes much more critical. So that's always the trade-off. Another trade-off of standing column versus closed loop is once a closed loop system is installed, all the motors and pumps are within the building or the vault. On a standing column well system, we have a geothermal well, or we have a well pump in our well. So commonly what that looks like on a residence is we have our pump at the bottom. Your average geothermal well system would look like a 400 to 800 foot well, depending on how large your residence is. And then a return pipe back to the well. When you do commercial standing column wells, I commonly go up to 1,500 feet deep and drill multiple. One of the largest systems I did for standing column wells was a 615,000 square foot nursing home in New Hampshire that had 16 1,500 foot boreholes in it. And open to rejection, which is again the least common, is where we hit a lot of water, where we're pumping from one well commonly to a return well. I like to draw the return well or the diffusion well larger. It's a lot easier to get water out of the earth than it is to put it back in it. So commonly you need much more return wells than supply. So again, these are not very common in this area. If we were on Cape Cod or Long Island, I'd be singing a different tune. And here's a chart, good, better, best. Again, these are all extremely efficient, but I just like to compare the three technologies. The reason open to injection is the most efficient is because your well temperature never changes. You're always using fresh water which is at the same temperature. So an example here, our well temperature would always be 50 degrees. Closed loop of the three would be the least efficient, but is still more efficient than any other heating or cooling device you can find out there. For first cost, closed loop again is the most expensive of the three, but we can pretty much do closed loop anywhere because we don't have to worry about water quality or geology as much. Obviously we care about conductivity, but we're able to do closed loop in much more often. That's why in geology, closed loop is always number one and open to injection is the least common. Maintenance, they all have their different maintenances. Closed loop, probably the benefit of closed loop is all the maintenance is within the building, and there's no more maintenance outside of the building once the system is installed. Regulatory purposes, closed loop has the least amount of regulatory checklists, and for thermal conductivity, it all comes down to sizing properly, but the benefit of an open system is you always have fresh water flowing into the system. The mantra I like to use is site-specific when asked what's better, closed loop or standing column, because those are the two most common systems, is the answer is site-specific. If I can do standing column and the geology lends itself, then I usually lean that way. But if there's maintenance reasons or if the geology or water quality is ever in question, closed loop is always the way I go, which is for Squamscott, that was a worry for us of the water quality, possibly brackish water, which is why we really only looked at the standing column or the closed loop system. Here's some just examples of how close you can drill a well to a building. Sorry, that's my time. We've drilled wells 10 feet. This was actually at Harvard, quite close to the building, so you'd be amazed how tightly you can get in the infrastructure. I've drilled in downtown New York and downtown Boston, so you can find a way. DigSafe doesn't always love us when we're asking where we have to dodge, but you'd be amazed how many well systems there are in very tight areas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach. Just gonna stop sharing for a minute. We're going to hear from Sarah Shemkus.
Hello. Are we good? How's that? Excellent. As Maureen mentioned, I am Sarah Shemkus. I am a member of the Clean Energy Commission. What we do is, wait, I wrote it down, promote clean energy options in Gloucester. What that means is it could be anything from connecting people with resources to learn about the benefits of heat pumps to working with the city to talk about the benefits of putting solar on municipal buildings. It's just a whole range of things generally aimed at the general advancement of clean energy in our wonderful city. I'm also a reporter for the Energy News Network. We are a nonprofit news outlet that covers clean energy on the state level. So I cover Massachusetts, I cover New Hampshire, soon a few other New England states. We also put together a fantastic daily newsletter looking at energy, basically any energy stories from the Northeast that have come out in the past day. So if you have any little bit of energy nerd in you, I suggest you head to energynews.us and sign up for that. So I first came across learning about geothermal in the course of my reporting. There are a couple of pilot projects going on in the state right now you might have heard of in Framingham and I believe Lowell. And while those were still in the planning state, I happened across it and talked to the great folks at HEET about what was going on there. And I've been fascinated about it ever since. So obviously Angie's gonna get into the nitty gritty of what network geothermal does. But in the meantime, I wanted to give kind of a little bit of a big picture of what it could mean for Gloucester. So in Gloucester, we've always been a pretty green city, but looking at energy affordability here and really any place in Massachusetts is kind of a different question. In Gloucester, everyone knows that in New England, the energy prices are pretty high. In Gloucester, the average household spends about 3% of their income on energy costs every year. Once you get into the low-income populations, that number goes up to 11%, which is really not very tenable. And probably natural gas prices are only going to get higher. There are some constraints on the infrastructure pumping natural gas up from the places where it is being fracked. And also, our distribution systems are aging and leaking and require lots of costly repairs that get passed on to consumers. I don't know how old the system is in Gloucester, but I know there are places in Boston where there were pipes put in the ground when Abraham Lincoln was president. So clearly, there's some costly upgrades that are going to be needed there. And at the same time, the state is moving away from natural gas. Governor Healy has made it a centerpiece of her administration that we're moving towards electrification and away from fossil fuels. We've just passed a big climate bill to make that a little easier. A couple of years ago, there was a huge order released by the Department of Public Utilities in which they said pretty explicitly, natural gas is not the way forward for Massachusetts. What that means is that as more and more people go completely electric, the people left on the natural gas system are going to be footing the bill for these costly upgrades, and it's going to get more and more expensive. But the people left on the system are going to be the people who can least afford to pay these increased costs. That brings us to network geothermal, which is a really promising way of addressing this. Again, I'm sure Angie will fill you in on all the details, but the gist is it's fairly analogous. You connect these geothermal systems that Zach was talking about like a natural gas system and deliver it to a group of houses or buildings or institutions that are using the energy. What's fantastic about this is that the fuel doesn't cost anything because it's coming from the heat of the earth. And no emissions, or very low emissions, only related to the electricity used to run the pumps. And then at the same time, lots of savings for the people using it. And one of the greatest parts of it is that as gas companies have to transition away from gas, a lot of the skills used by the employees and the business models are very similar between a gas distribution system and a network geothermal. So it creates a really viable route for transitioning these thousands of people in these natural gas careers into a new future as we move away from gas. So here in Gloucester, we have received a $50,000 grant to study the possibilities of a network geothermal system in a specific neighborhood. It is an environmental justice neighborhood, which means, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the term, but it basically means it's a neighborhood designated as likely to be overburdened in an environmental sense because of having high levels of minorities or low income. And so this is part of the community engagement and kicking off the process of studying that here. So I guess that about covers what I have to say. I really look forward to hearing more and hope that we can make something like this happen in Gloucester.
Sorry for the delay here, we just can't find my slides. Just a moment. So our next speaker is Angie Alberto-Escobar, and she is the Gas-to-Geo Director of HEET.
It's nice to be here with you all in the pouring rain. Happy you all made it. I know it's a tough one to get in. So I'll tell you a little bit about who HEET is before I get started. I'm going to reiterate a lot about what was said, just with a lot more pictures. So HEET is a nonprofit climate solutions incubator. We started incubating this baby, this little egg, geothermal networks, and then the baby grew and we couldn't let it leave the nest. It needed a little bit more tending. And so that's HEET's mission is an ethical thermal transition. I like to state right away that we don't take money from industry, gas or geo, so that we can maintain neutrality. Folks can trust what we say because we're not funded by these industries, but our mission is driven by data. So as Sarah alluded to, the climate goals of the US and Massachusetts, we have them. We have targets for 2030, for 2050, and a large part of the strategy to meet those emissions reductions targets is to electrify our economy. 30% of our emissions come from building sector operations, and so that means that there's a huge opportunity here to cut emissions, a third of our emissions. Currently, the strategy is to pair renewable electricity with energy-efficient electric heat pumps. The ones I'm showing here on the left are air source heat pumps, but heat pumps all the same, ultra efficient, and they use electric energy that it will be more and more emissions-free as we decarbonize our grid. So this is what our electric peaks look like currently in the US. Currently, we turn on our ACs in the summer. That's when most of our electric use is, when we have our window ACs cranking. And so when we electrify our heating and cooling in all of our buildings, that's the dominant strategy for this 30%, what will happen to our electric peaks? I want to remind folks that our electric peaks, the highest amount of energy that we need at any given point, is what our grid is sized for. And so any increase in those peaks will dictate the size that we need for our grid to reliably meet the demand of electricity. So here is a graph. If you snapped your fingers and overnight you electrified, here are the different electric peak curves over a year with different technologies. If you electrify with an electric baseboard for the heating season, you can see that those peaks, those winter peaks, that summer peak shifts to a winter peak, and that winter peak is really high, like the wings of that falcon, the wings of the falcon. And you can see here on the left that it's correlated to COP. COP is coefficient of performance, essentially how much energy can you use based on how much electricity you're pulling from the grid. If you have an air source heat pump rather than an electric baseboard for your winter heating, the wings start to come down, that peak starts to come down. And so the more efficient technology that we use, the less the build out of our electric grid will have to be. The electric grid is paid for by the rate base, by customers. So this, in turn, affects the electric rates that we pay. And so having those wings of that falcon as low as possible is really critical in order to not only meet the goals, but do so in an uber efficient way that minimizes the build out and the investment that we'll have to make into our grid, which will take not only money, but time to build out. And so if you can see, ground source heat pumps with a coefficient of performance of 4 is this green line. It's pretty good. Network geothermal is a little bit more efficient here. You can see this purple line is the lowest. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that. This is a report from the Department of Energy. They commissioned Oak Ridge National Lab to do a similar study to the Falcon Curve. The Falcon Curve is impact on our electric grid, but they included how much transmission we would have to build out against an air source heat pump scenario, because air source heat pumps are really dominating the heat pump market. Everybody wants an air source heat pump. And so it was really important to compare them apples to apples. And it would take a third of the cost to decarbonize our grid with ground source heat pumps compared to air source heat pumps. And it would take 24,000 less miles of transmission lines, which again takes time. So this not only reflects the overall cost of our energy transition, but the time that it would take to actually enact this energy transition. And of course, in any operation, to even build transmission lines to move renewable energy, there's still emissions associated with those operations. And so those are hidden emissions that would also be a part of that. So I want to just leave you with this message. Efficiency matters. It is really, really important. So at the same time that we have these goals and these challenges, this is what the gas system looks like in the greater Boston area. We have a lot of leak-prone pipe because we have really old pipes. They've been around since the 1800s, and so there's a lot of cast iron pipes and all sorts of pipes that need replacement or repair, and it's incredibly costly. Economist Dory Seavey did an analysis on gas pipeline replacement in Massachusetts and estimated the cost to be $1.4 trillion. These are dollars that we're quite literally stranding in the ground. We won't be able to use these gas pipes after 2050, maybe before, and we're shoveling money into the ground. This is the stranded asset problem. And so why not use those $1.4 trillion to invest in renewable energy instead? And that's not even considering the cost of upgrading our electric grid, modernizing our grid. This is what our grid looks like today. There's still a lot of electricity capacity constraints in our current electric grid system. So there are some funds that need to be invested into upgrading our grid if we want to electrify as well, to be able to move that electricity. So I like to show this graph because we have a graph here on the right of heat pump sales. A lot of these are air source heat pumps, as I mentioned earlier. But they're outselling gas furnaces, and they continue to outsell gas furnaces. And so currently, electrification is happening, but it's happening on a house-by-house basis or in an unmanaged way. So what happens when we electrify in an unmanaged way? Well, folks that can afford to buy an air source heat pump do, and they electrify their homes. And when we still have the same gas system, just less customers paying into that rate base, our gas rates go up because there's the same amount of expenses to pay for, but just less people. And so as gas rates go up, people really start to flee the gas system. And this is called the utility death spiral, or the last grandma problem, where you can imagine just one single grandma left on the gas system and one single gas worker running around maintaining the gas system. And that is what we're trying to avoid. We want it not only to be safe through a transition, steward it safely through a transition, but keep people in their jobs and keep rates stable. So HEET, our role in this is really just to talk to people and to understand what people's motivations are from every angle, including the gas utility, including geothermal industry. What is possible to design? What do people want from a new thermal energy system? And we got this list here over many years of conversations. People want their thermal system to be secure and safe. We want to move into the new age of renewables, so making sure that it's 100% renewable, reducing our carbon emissions. They need it to be reliable. People need to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer, especially as summers get hotter, and resilient to blackouts or brownouts or anything like that. Scalable and adaptable is something that came from the engineers. You want to be able to interconnect these systems and grow these systems over time. Adjust workforce transition. So what happens to the gas workers? We need to make sure that they're taken care of as well. They've been fighting for 100 years for good wages. It's a risky job, but they should be stewarded as well, not just the technology. Equitable access. So to be able to give anybody and everybody access to a renewable energy technology despite their income or education level, and affordability. So maintaining good energy rates, low energy rates, affordable rates. And in order for a gas utility to see a new business model with this technology, it needs to make economic sense. All at the same time, we need to do it quickly, and we need to scale really, really fast if we want to meet our climate goals. So after a lot of conversations, a lot of charrettes is what we call them at HEET, community charrettes, with engineers, chemists, all sorts of folks, geothermal networks emerged as the technology that has the potential to meet every single one of those parameters that I showed in the last slide. And so I won't explain too much because Zach already did a fantastic job, but this is what it would look like in a community. You just have a main loop in the right-of-way of the street with service lines to every home. And either in the right-of-way or someplace else, you can have bores, vertical wells that harness the temperature of the earth. This would just have plain water or plain water with food-grade glycol, as Zach mentioned, and it would add the provision of cooling. It wouldn't just be a heating network, but now it would add cooling, which, as I stated, we need. Folks that are vulnerable, children, folks with asthma, the elderly, suffer from heat waves, and this is a way that we can equitably provide cooling as a service. So what HEET has proposed is a merged gas-to-geo rate base, where instead of having an unmanaged transition, we convert entire communities at a time, maintaining that very important balance of infrastructure to customers so that our rates don't spike. And it provides equitable access to anybody that's on that street, no matter their income or education level. If a utility or a geo utility comes knocking on the door offering the service, they can opt in. So what's the difference between a geothermal network and a geo building, like Zach was talking about? Well, this is what Zach was talking about. It's some vertical wells, and it goes up to your house. So you, as an individual, are paying for that upfront cost of that energy source to be able to harvest energy from the earth. What we're proposing is that we have shared infrastructure with service lines to each building. So the capital investment is done by some utility. It can be a gas utility that wants to transition into a new business model using pipes, but just water pipes, or it can be a developer. There are geo utilities that do this as well, and can come and install shared infrastructure, finance that, and then everyone just pays into the rates. We're not talking about a geo district, which has a massive heat pump that circulates hot water, for example. There's efficiency losses if you do that. When you have an ambient temperature loop, you actually have an ultra efficient system. We're also not talking about geopower, where we're going super, super deep into the earth to create electricity. This is for heating and cooling, moving water, and then the heat pump moves energy. So why do we care about networking? Energy sharing. So I'm just gonna go really quickly through what the benefit is of networking. So we have different types of buildings, typically in a town center. We have residential, maybe a grocery store, and an office building. And some of them are rejecting heat, while others are absorbing heat, even in the same time of the year. So imagine this office building has a bunch of computers in it, humming along, a bunch of people in it, but there's not a lot of folks so they're cooling, sorry. If they're in cooling mode, that means that they're rejecting heat. That heat can be captured by this shared loop. And since the loop is shared, that heat can then be used by any of the other buildings on the loop. This means that the infrastructure, the bore field infrastructure actually can be minimized because there's already this synchronous load sharing or this load canceling that's happening by connecting the buildings together. So you want diverse load profiles, usually residential and commercial can be paired because their load profiles or energy use throughout the day is different. And bore holes, bore fields, geothermal can also provide thermal storage. So in the summer, while everyone's in cooling mode and everyone's rejecting heat into the loop, that heat will then move into the subsurface, through the bores, through the boreholes, into the subsurface, and then can be pulled out later in the winter. We have thermal storage as well. The pipes are HDPE pipes. They're just a different diameter because the energy density is different, but the materials that are used to install new gas pipe today is the same materials that we can use to install geothermal pipes in the future. So a lot of the skills from the pipe layers of the gas workforce can actually transition into the clean energy economy. So just to reemphasize the list, this is what was required by system stakeholders through many conversations, and the geothermal networks has the potential to meet all of them if done correctly. Currently, part of HEET's work is our national networks, so we talk to all kinds of folks. We continue to have conversations about this, and currently there's a coalition of gas utilities that are pictured here on the left, their logos, that represent 50% of gas customers in the nation, that meet once a quarter to discuss the potential of geothermal networks and share learnings, because they're all doing it for the first time. But it's really bringing me hope, at least, to know that they're having conversations about it and sharing as much knowledge as possible. And Sarah talked about this. This is the Gas-to-Geo transition in Massachusetts. So HEET started mapping gas leaks, and we educate folks on kind of the whole picture, zooming out of the impact of a large-scale thermal transition. And because of that, folks, require technical assistance to take it further, to look into a feasibility study, to engage their community on the topic, to host these kinds of meetings. So we developed a Kickstart Massachusetts program for feasibility studies. Gloucester is a recipient of one. So currently there are 12 communities exploring the concept formally through this program, and more informally through conversations and our resources that are open source. We also have, in order to maximize the amount of learnings and share back to the public, to you all, to anybody that browses our website, we developed this research team that includes the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Berkeley National Labs, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, UC Berkeley, MassCC is our funder, just a whole bunch of really great people, really smart people, to collect as many learnings as possible from the pilots that are happening in Massachusetts. One of the sub-teams is creating a digital twin, or basically a working model of the system, so that we can learn through a virtual model rather than learn through physical project implementation, which will take longer and cost more. So we can actually learn through the model. So it's being refined with real data from the pilot projects in Massachusetts. Here are the impact studies that will be that the research team covers. We're going to learn about emissions, like what the real emissions impact is, what the real grid impact is, the cost impact, how is it affecting the ecology around it, what are the air quality metrics that have changed, or air quality health indicators, and equity. So how is it affecting folks? And again, everything that we do at HEET is centered around people and making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. And so these are the stakeholder groups, more or less, that we engage in to talk about this pathway, the Gas-to-Geo pathway. Yeah, and so if you want Geo for your house, you can put yourself on a map by scanning this QR code with your phone. And everything that HEET creates, everything that HEET does is open to the public. We post it as fast as we can to our website. And you're able to adapt it, adapt it for your own community and use it. So yeah, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angie. Next, we're going to hear from Lori Timmermann.
Hey, all. Can I just get a show of hands of those of you who are fairly far along this journey? So most of you are just starting the process. Okay. So I gave Maureen 2 sets of slides. The ones that I'm showing you right now talk about the next 3-year plan. I'm with National Grid. I work in the Mass Save portion of National Grid, helping municipalities not only improve the energy efficiency and decarbonize their municipal infrastructure, but also how do they reach the rest of their community, the residents and small businesses and others, with building decarbonization as well as clean transportation efforts. So our programs are 3-year programs. We're just at the end of the most recent one, and a new one's going to be starting in 2025. And I've given you a snapshot of what the incentives are going to look like for doing heat pumps in that time frame. If any of you who raised your hands need to know about the current rates and how long they're going to last, come see me at the table afterwards. So the other thing I wanted to say is super excited to be here and talk to you all. I'm glad this crowd is as big as it is. It's really exciting and motivating to me. So thank you for all of you who worked on this. I brought a show house, a little doll house, to talk about all the different ways that you can make change in your homes. I'm glad to talk you through that after the event if you want to stop by, and we can talk about the various efforts that you might want to consider making. They're all tied into the things that have been described already. We very much encourage you to improve the energy efficiency of your home before you do the ground source heat pumps, because the size system that you'll need will be smaller, and that's a good thing financially and for other reasons. So this is a little just quick overview. This will be in the slide decks when we send them out, but it shows some of the goals of the efforts that we're hoping to make in the next 3-year plan. I don't need to go through all of these, but kind of what I'd like you to take away from this is, like, there's a lot of effort and time and money going into trying to help you all be successful at this decarbonization journey, and the goals that the program administrators, the utilities across the states have made to try to support this effort are quite in depth in terms of trying to weatherize more than 174,000 homes. Huge goals. Trying to reach more low and moderate income folks in the state. Developing new and different programs to reach audiences that are making more than the low income standard group that that have been receiving great incentives up until now. We now have more moderate income incentives available for folks in the next 3-year plan. Those are going to also be impacting the heat pump programs. So want to make you aware of some of the things that are going on that could impact you or your neighbors or others in Gloucester. So this is going to be in the slide deck. I don't need to go through all of this, but just put it up there to let you know that there's a lot of incentive funds that are going to be available to you to help you with your efforts. I want to get just a little bit into the details. I know today is, you can see what the title is, so I'll just move up so you can see the whole chart. Today is focused on the bottom row, but I think it's important to include the rest of the information for you so that you can kind of see the full picture. Ground source heat pumps are a great solution to implement if you're able to afford them. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of the resources that are here. I think it's as Zach was saying, it's the most efficient way of going about this effort. For some folks, it's not financially feasible. So there are incentives available for you in the other categories as well. So that's why I'm giving you all the information. The program's changing a little bit over the next 3 years. Those of you who are familiar with what's offered today, you can use incentives to do partially decarbonizing your home or fully decarbonizing your home. And that's going to continue into the next 3-year plan. There's going to be bonuses offered for folks who get weatherization along with doing the effort to do the heat pumps in your home. You can see some of those listed. So I've kind of outlined these up to you. In some categories, you will see that the incentives that are offered are going to go down a little bit over the 3-year plan, so there's motivation to act earlier rather than later in those 3 years, but still really great incentives that can help you with the efforts in your home. The other piece of what I think is important for you is a lot of people use the HEET loan, and I know HEET is used a lot in here, H-E-E-T, and this one is H-E-A-T. So this is the loan that's available to those who get a home energy assessment or who have done a home energy assessment recently and are eligible for additional funds through a 0% loan. It's been in the past for you to do the efficiency measures that were recommended in your home energy assessment. So that loan program is changing a little bit, and based on your level of state median income, you're going to be eligible for 0%, but depending on where you fall in state median income, that may be for a 7-year loan, or if you're at 135 to 300% of state median income, it might be for a 5-year loan, or if you're earning above 300% of state median income, they're reducing that to a 3-year loan. So they're trying to make the funds that they have available go further for the people who need them the most, and so that's why it's been changed a little bit. HEET loan amounts are also being capped at $25,000, which is a bit of a change from the current program, so I want to point this out. I will send to Maureen so she can distribute the details around all of this, and that way you all have it after. I think that you all gave emails, so you'll have that after the event. I think that's all I have to share. Please come see me, and we can chat things up over near the showcase house, but I appreciate you inviting me here.
So much, Lori. Well, we've got 15 minutes left, and this is what I'd like to do, is to say some thank yous first, and then I'd like for you to just visit whoever you'd like to visit who's here. We've got Lori, we've got Angie, we've got Zach, we have Sarah and Sam Cleaves is here. And also Vicky Massoni, she's a consultant with the City of Gloucester, has worked with a lot of municipalities. She could also answer some questions. Before we close, I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. It was really fascinating. I just learned so much. It was great. But I also wanted to thank the team that put the program together. From the City of Gloucester, Alex Koppelman, who's here with us, Bailey McCall, who's over here, the sustainability coordinator for the City of Gloucester. Alex is the community development director. Also, Vicky Masoni, we worked early on in the program, and Pam Toby, who's the Communications Director for the City of Gloucester. So thank to all of you. It's been a wonderful experience to bring this together. So again, please have some more soup if you'd like. We've got lids if you'd like to take some home. I'm really encouraging everyone to take some home with you. Please have some drinks as you walk around and talk to Lori and visit our other experts. But thank you so much for being here this evening.